4. The Witch of the Western Weald. The town welcomed the news of the disaster in Sawyer's Holler with the resigned grit of war-weary soldiers. Every soul in Irvine, from the youngest child to the oldest crone, was so accustomed to ill news from the hills that it seemed to them almost a matter of course. The drawn, ever-vigilant locals, who dwelt beneath the thing's shadow for a full year, were hard to surprise and harder to frighten, a state of affairs I'd never witnessed this far away from the Wilderland frontier. Zachary Walker and I found our scattered horses a full 2 miles up the road, and had ridden back with Van Dyer's mount in tow. I ensured the man's remains were left in good hands, but I heeded Walker's words that we shouldn't linger long in town. Once word spread of the failed excursion, questions would be asked, and our already short time would be chewed up by curious or frightened townspeople desperate for any information they could draw out of us. Walker, who himself had wholly denied there might be anything surreal about the attacks until that day, had rightly concluded any questions would lead to debates over the veracity of our seemingly impossible experience. We told a servant of the Clays what had transpired, then informed him that we wished to waste no time in continuing the hunt and, God willing, avenging the doctor. We neglected to mention Van Dyer's silver shot, which we'd kept for ourselves alongside the beautifully crafted rifle. With that, we'd ridden right through and out into the low-rolling hill country west of town, where the attacks were almost unheard of, and few had cause to fear. Walker had a plan, and though he would only hint at his aims, I figured he knew the area best, and didn't press him for the intricacies. First, we stopped in at his own home, a shoddy but sturdy cabin he shared with his elderly wife, to make off with a time-worn silver platter and saucers the man had stowed away in his root cellar. His wife didn't realize what we were up to until we'd already retrieved the silver, and by that time we'd already set to melting the stuff using a crude earthen forge Walker utilized in shoeing horses. He cast 10 loads for his blunderbuss, and with Van Dyer's rifle on my shoulder, and with Mrs. Walker raising hell all the while, we both left a bit more confident in our abilities. The sun had set by then, but I supposed the thing in the hills was licking its wounds. The noisy nighttime birdsong and the glint of silver in my shot pouch helped to allay my fears, as did the peaceful slopes and open meadows of the landscape around us. The Appalachian tangle was beginning to die away here, and the open pasturage and rolling hills of central Kentucky were evident. Even with all that had transpired that day, Walker made talk about old barroom brawls and close-fought duels, making the journey bearable. The moon lit our meandering path, and by the time we came up a barely maintained dirt walk onto a wooded knoll on the western edge of the county, I was almost enjoying the ride. "Here we are," Walker announced. "My cousin's place." The building squatting amongst the stooping old trees on the hilltop was weathered and half decayed, and the wilting sod which made up the low roof looked like something one would see across the Atlantic in the Old World. Chimes of bones softly rustled against the walls in the errant night wind, and the whole clearing before the house seemed to stink of strong herbs and overripe fruit. An unwholesome colony of mushrooms, slick with some sort of slimy liquescence, had almost devoured the crude stone stoop, and it was only with some hesitation that Walker delicately stepped up amongst the foul fungi and rapped upon the rickety old door. "Mind your damned tongue," Walker wheezed over one shoulder. "Already got a monster to worry about. We don't need hexes heaped on top of that." I wasn't about to protest. After the surreal events of the day, this little hut in the woods seemed pried from a dark old fairy yarn, and I was in no mood to tangle with anything else I didn't understand. The nervous unease the place clearly raised in the usually jovial Walker was merely extra incentive. A round, toad-like woman, even more ancient than my companion, hobbled on a gnarled old oak branch onto the stoop, standing toe-to-toe with her visitor. She huffed, a noise not unlike the sound a disturbed dog makes when woken from sleep. She then conversed at speed with Zachary Walker in a dialect so thickly accented my ears struggled to keep pace. In all my growing years in Tennessee, and in all the time spent wandering since, I've never heard anything quite like the grumbling diction of Walker's elder cousin. From what I gathered, she hadn't seen Walker, or any of the other Walkers for that matter, for many a year. The Walker clan was rather standoffish with her, for she had a dark reputation in the region. Thus, the first few minutes were spent trying to win her over, with Zachary telling her he'd had his eyes opened by the strangeness unfolding in Irvine. He was ready to entertain she might not be mad after all, he said, and implored her to share all she might know about the nameless thing which plagued the night. Known by the people of Estill County as the Witch of the Western Weald, she had, like her strange grandmother before her, trafficked in herbal remedies and frontier fortune-telling to those who could provide her labor or food. This modest existence as a granny witch had fallen apart decades ago when a man in the settlement which would one day become Irvine had accused her of offering to curse a rival farmer with whom he was locked in a land dispute. Though there obviously had been no legal action brought against her, the Witch of the Western Weald had slowly been left to dwell on her secluded hilltop alone, as little more than a local legend to frighten children who wandered the woods past dusk. When all the troubles had started the previous year, several locals had pointed blame in her direction. This was fast ruled out, as the old woman could barely move, and the few locals who were bold enough to knock on her door to interrogate her turned up no traces of some unthinkable ritual magic being worked in her little hut. She was strange, true, but her activities seemed mostly to consist of tending a small herb garden, foraging on the knoll around her house, and trapping small birds and squirrels for meat. She had, however, portentously warned those who had come to visit her that something dark had arisen in the mountains, and that it would not be sent back by mortal means. Most, Zachary Walker among them, had dismissed this as the wistful whispering of a woman who had dwelt alone in the wilderness for half her life, and whose strange readings and old-world mysticism lent her a predisposition to the fantastic. Now, with Van Dyer's own mysticism seemingly confirmed, Walker begged for his cousin to reveal what might be done to us, that we might put an end to the thing once and for all. The witch, for all her righteous vindication and gloating scorn of Walker, seemed to have been expecting this. She hobbled back into the hut only to return with a great old iron nail and a yellowed scrap of home-dried parchment. She scrawled a passage in gibberish which might have been German down upon the paper in a red ink by the light of a small lantern before handing both it and the iron nail to me. Zachary Walker needed to explain most of the rest to me after we'd left, for as I've said, the witch's diction was anathema to me. She instructed us to find the den of the thing while it was still tending its injuries from the silver. She bade us find a fetish of some kind, a dried human heart, which would be squirreled away wherever the creature bedded down. Then, with the iron spike, I should pin the parchment to the withered old husk. Only then would the thing come to its well-deserved end. As for where to find this den, the witch had extended a thick and withered finger to me, implying I would know where to look. Indeed, when Walker deciphered this for me, I knew exactly what the crone had meant. When we did at last leave the little hut past midnight, we left the old woman seated on a stool, nodding as she watched us go, like an ancient pagan Norn, pleased that she'd set things right again.